As the title of the video suggests, I've played a bunch of games with X-Men without Storm, and I'm just curious as to whether or not that's possible. Storm leadership is not a play style that particularly interests me in Marvel Crisis Protocol, but the X-Men as characters are characters I like a lot from the fiction. So let's see if there's a route we can play X-Men and not play Storm. So the first thing I did when embarking upon this experiment was I went and I looked at the win rates. And the win rates are really interesting. So Storm's at the top, as you'd expect. And Professor exactly matches the win rate of the faction. And the faction is really being pulled down by a lot of Cyclops losses. There's some exciting Cyclops builds happening right now in the new packet. So maybe we'll delve into those if this video hits big. But I wanted to explore Professor because Professor X is like the quintessential X-Men to me. And I just think his leadership and his suite is really, really interesting. That being said, this faction is really difficult to pick up and play. So like a lot of competitive players think they can kind of just play certain factions. Like certain factions are like the lists feel really solved and their play style is really straightforward. I think Web Warriors comes here as like an example because Web Warriors, like every player understands how to play scenario on some level, and they know that Web Warriors have lots of tools to play scenario well. So lots of competitive players think they can play Web Warriors very well. X-Men aren't really like that because of their super complicated turn one stuff. There is a large like knowledge buy-in required of you to like understand all the X-Men turn ones in order for you to really know how to play this faction at a competitive level that I think a lot of other factions just don't have. Like, I think S.H.I.E.L.D. is a really complicated faction to play. I think Apocalypse is a really complicated faction to play, but it doesn't require you to just have all this upfront knowledge the way that X-Men turn ones have. I'm going to try to steer away from a lot of that because I don't think it's super interesting to talk about on this video. I'm also just not well versed in it. I know just enough to kind of like get by and play this at like the bottom level of competitive play. And a lot of that just comes from one of the best X-Men players in the world, plays in my meta, Nate. He's on my podcast. You can check out Alfredo Size 3 Taco Truck, a Marvel Crisis Protocol podcast here, and hear all about his opinions on X-Men. But these are mine. Another great resource other than our podcast for X-Men stuff is, I believe we have a How Not to Instantly Lose that's very outdated, but some of the stuff is still good about it, talking about X-Men turn ones and how to play around them. It has kind of an outdated version of the Storm leadership on it, but a lot of the information is still usable. And then also Vodka Blitz's blog, which will be linked in the comments down or in the description down below, has lots of good, like, how do I play X-Men, how do I play the openings stuff, and I recommend that you use that as a resource. All right, so here's the roster. So we're playing Professor X as our leader. Professor X has kind of like a discount Steve 1 leadership. It's weaker on turn 1, but you can get kind of a Steve 1 level effect out of it if you jump through some hoops by using superpowers that cost 1 or characters that have enough power to use their more expensive superpowers. And then as the game goes later, it gets slightly better than Steve leadership because you can use it on anything, not just superpowers. So the power you gain from it can be used on spenders. So if you want to do 2/5 cost spenders, you can kind of make that happen. But its big benefit is that it works with reroll bubbles, which Steve doesn't really work with. Like, yes, there's Heimdall, but like Heimdall just got buffed. We haven't really seen him work his way into the Steve leadership, but that's like the big advantage is that the leadership power passing around thing that Professor X does works really well with reroll bubbles. And you'll see in this list, I do a lot of like multiple reroll bubbles and a lot of passing the power back and forth to get lots and lots of advantage from the leadership. Professor X, the main thing he brings to the table is his reroll bubble. His reroll bubble is awkward because it is only once per turn. It's kind of the worst version of this effect. I mean, I guess technically Nova's version is the worst version of this effect. because that's defensive only. But it being only once per turn can cause you like awkward problems where you're like, I want to spend power here, but maybe I need it for the next attack. And that can make it kind of hard to navigate Professor's power correctly. The other thing he really brings to the table is mental suggestion, his ability to essentially advance a character. And the meta is currently very, very Hulk heavy, which means that being able to walk characters or being able to walk big characters away from your team is more valuable in the current climate than it normally is. So a tick in his favor. The downside of Professor X is that he kind of has the Doc Ock 2 problem, where on 1 power and on 10 power, the characters, how level he personally is, or how dangerous he personally is not that different. His spender is very, very bad. It's not very good at all. So you often end up doing 2 mental suggestions as his crackback turn, or you end up activating some other model and dumping 3 of his power into rerolls. It makes Professor X kind of an awkward character to save with Dream. It makes him an activation that's really easy to lose. You have to be really careful with him. He's also somewhat fragile to being thrown at because he can't use his Mystic Defense to protect himself with that. He's just def 2 against throws, and then he's only 11 hit points. So you kind of have to be careful with him, but he also can't just hang back. He has to be in a position where his 5-die gun is contributing and building power so that he can spend power on rerolls. And it often takes multiple activations of his rerolls for him to really get his value, which can make it awkward if they spike 3 or 4 damage onto him, and now he's at risk of dying in any given activation. You're like, I want to go with him, but also he's not my best activation because he rarely is. You just kind of have to be careful with him. On the plus side, he is a fasto, so if we're playing stuff like Skrulls, he can walk up, grab the middle, and then walk back to safety, even if he's getting pushed. So he is kind of shockingly fast when he does get displaced, and because he has helmet, he is rarely displaced. But overall, Professor, okay leader, very good leadership. If you're playing Professor X, I think Nightcrawler is mandatory. The games for this video started before the May errata, and now I'm recording this after the May errata. I had a big section here planned about how we need to nerf this character. This character is way too strong, and then they did. And I think he's in a much better place. I think the stun not being free nerfs one of his 2 modes while keeping the thing that makes him strong. The stun without damage could be incredibly punishing to lots and lots of models. So the change there, I think, was incredibly warranted. The change for Concealed in Shadow to be called Stealth, to grant the Stealth rule. There's one thing in the game that ignores Stealth right now. I don't really think it's that's that big of a deal. Maybe in the future it'll be a bigger deal, but it's good. Nightcrawler, he's extremely strong. He's so mobile. We're playing lots of pay-to-flips. He can run to all the pay-to-flips. A lot of X-Men players have kind of maligned the new pay-to-flip suite because more people are good at it. They're closer together. So the extreme mobility of Nightcrawler isn't as essential to playing pay-to-flips well, but still his ability to trivially visit 3 points in a turn, maybe 4, depending on whether we're on Kraan or not, is very strong, so he's very good at that game. And then his spender, when backed up by rerolls, gets stupid very, very quickly. The character doesn't really struggle to get access to power, especially in Professor, who's handing power around. If you do the classic spender opener, if you're planning on killing something with Nightcrawler, the classic way to start that off is you bamf for power to get 1 teleport. You punch somebody and then puff of smoke to get a 2nd teleport. You have 2 extra dice now. So your first spender is 7 dice, 5 dice plus 2 dice for having teleported twice. That's a straight up coin flip to get started. But then this list can stack 6 rerolls on that and fish for the trigger to get it started. And then every subsequent trigger is easier because you pick up a dice every single time. Now, Nightcrawler has, since I have stopped playing this list, foes have seemed to come back into the meta in a big way with Trap House being available. Nightcrawler is very weak into Trap House, so be super careful of that. But I kind of think the list kind of just has to play Nightcrawler anyway. But the ability to just like have Nightcrawler like kill a Hulk from full like isn't as far flung as you might think it is. And then also you don't need to kill things from full. You can just have an activation where he does a single spender and spends like 5 power and does like 12 damage or something. Especially into like low defense things like Sentinel Primes or other things that have like large hit point pools but are only like def 3. We also have a kind of side tangent into mass transit. This list started off with the mass transit play being the like idea for the list. So there was this build of Chuck that went on like 6-7 months ago that got popular, but then it kind of has some fundamental flaws that prevent it from being extremely strong, but it has an extremely strong turn 1. And that's where you play Nightcrawler, Wong, and Professor, and then you play typically 2 more strong things. Usually one's a reroll bubble. I've seen it played with Invincible Iron Man, and I'm playing it with Sentinel Prime. And then some other damage dealer that fits the profile. It could be Logan, it could be Wolverine, it can be Psylocke. If you have to go down to 3 points, it can be Domino. It can be X-23. There's like lots of builds of the thing. But generally the thing is you go with Wong first. Wong generates a power, then spends 2 power to give Nightcrawler a power. The leadership triggers from Professor X, granting Nightcrawler another power. And then Wong goes and stands on a point. Then Nightcrawler plays Mass Transit for the 3 power that he has, his starting one, the one from Wong, the one from the leadership, and teleports himself and the other 3 models on your team forward. He goes 3 forward and places each of them within 1. This is extremely threatening and can apply lots of damage to the midline of the board. And then it has 2 reroll bubbles. So every single thing that you do is backed up by multiple rerolls, and the first reroll you use on any given turn can be passed to another that power that's spent can be passed to another reroll bubble to like kind of refund the reroll power. It feels really, really good. It often gets off to a big lead, especially if somebody walks into it and they've never seen it before. But it often gets off to a big extract or points lead or an attrition lead, depending on kind of how your opponent plays it. But then it fades into the background as it struggles to overcome its extreme support bloat. The real issue is that after turn 2, Wong essentially does nothing for the list. So like on turn 1, he hands Nightcrawler power. On turn 2, he can pull Nightcrawler's stagger. And then the character doesn't do anything. And he's just like 2 threat of dead weight, making the list essentially impossible to play below 18 threat. And like pretty detrimental to play below 19 threat because you're playing 2 threat down. Like you get big early advantage off of playing Wong, and then Wong is just like dead weight from there. So this started as like me trying to build that mass transit build and see what we could do there. I quickly bailed out of that as you will bump into the support bloat or like Wong not doing enough work, and just like it feels like you're playing 2 points down. And you're playing a strong gimmick, but it's not enough to overcome playing 2 points down. But the thing that I discovered in this is that the list is absurd on senators. Because you can grab your opponent's senators and back up. And if they commit to their senators, you just blow them off the table. It can use that like extract advantage to like get huge upside. And like its build at 19 is very dangerous. We'll talk more about like how specifically the list is absurdly strong on senators when we get to crises, but know that it is very strong on senators. All right, we talked about Wong. Wong is only here for mass transit, and he can pull Nightcrawler's stagger on turn 2. That's not always correct to do, because sometimes you need Nightcrawler to be your first activation on turn 2. So you might want to just mass transit and shake. You kind of have to feel that out. But Wong's here only for that. We play him out nowhere else. Our other big splash here is Sentinel Prime MK4. He is here for his reroll bubble, and because he is a reroll bubble that consistently does work. The other reroll bubble options here, either Shuri or Invincible Iron Man, don't themselves contribute to the game plan enough or contribute enough damage or output to overcome the bloat that comes from having my leader also kind of be a support model. And then, God forbid, we're also playing Wong when we're doing the mass transit thing. Sentinel Prime can overcome those things because he turns power into damage very consistently, which turns back into power, which he can do the super satisfying reroll chain of like, I reroll one with him, hand it to Professor. Next turn, you attack one of my guys. Professor makes me reroll one die, hand it back to Prime. And it's like this really satisfying like circle of power that feels really good and I think actually is strong. If you are ever operating the Professor leadership and you don't know where to put power, putting it on Prime is almost never wrong. All right, next up, let's get into our X-Men suite that aren't like the core game plan and why we're here. So we have Domino. Domino is the most cuttable member of the squad. She's here for when you need a damage 3. I also do have Gambit in the list. Gambit might just be better at her job now because of his ability to really take advantage of reroll bubbles because of his double wilds thing. If you were looking to cut her for something, I would maybe think about Colossus. I think New Colossus is really interesting in the list, and I haven't played a ton of him. With the list being so reliant on Nightcrawler, I'm not sure how often he would actually make the cut, but I do think it's a thing that needs to be explored. Magik. Magik was recently buffed. I was playing her before the buff, and then after the buff as well. She's mostly a Senator's piece. With the buffs, she may be good elsewhere, but I play her mostly in Senators. She is still fragile and still has above average output, is how I would describe her. She's really strong on the Senators play because you can teleport her forward and she can pay 1 power to bump into range of picking up a Senator, take a gunshot, and then back up. And pick it up, obviously. So you teleport everybody forward with mass transit. She gunshots somebody from there. If she can't reach, she bumps to a Senator, takes a gunshot from there, picks up, backs up. Or maybe you played first class and you just pick up for free. And then she can do really, really crazy output. She uses the rerolls well. She's just a strong value 3 that plays the Senator's game really well. Speaking of which, I also have Iceman, who's also a Senator's piece, because he has like airlift, the thing that Sam has, where he can move friendlies. So it can let you pick up a friendly Senator, like get teleported onto a Senator, and then be within 2 of a friend that's picked up a Senator, and then you can back them up further after you chain power to him. He's also pretty good into Hulk. Not that Hulk cares about slow, but he does have a wild stagger on his spender. Staggering Hulk and other big boys is very good, especially coming out of such a cheap chassis. And he's also, like, Namor's not super in the meta, but if they have Namor, they're likely to drop it into X-Men because Namor ignores Xavier's dream. And Iceman is very, very good into Namor. Namor hates being slow, and Iceman applies slow to Namor easily. 4 threats. My 4 threat of choice is Psylocke. I've played a bunch of different things in this slot. I like Psylocke the best. The ones that didn't make the cut, we didn't play Wolverine. I felt that Psylocke was just kind of a better version of what Wolverine was doing, but if you like Wolverine more, you can kind of play him here. The other reason to leave Wolverine out is we kind of have tactics cards are very tight. So playing Exceptional Healing is hard to fit in here. Same thing with like Weapon X or any other card you'd want to enable Wolverine here. If you play Colossus, maybe Wolverine gets more exciting for Fastball Special. But again, I don't know how you fit both of those things in and still play all the like major pieces you want to play. Why I like Psylocke. Chuck unlocks telekinetic combat enhancement on turn 1. So it's not it's very likely for you to make a 7-die attack on turn 1, which can really get you off to the races. Her personal rerolls, which are an unlimited number of rerolls, but only once per turn, so you can spend any amount of power and once per turn, means that you can create like a third reroll bubble when Psylocke is activating, because Psylocke can use her own rerolls, she can use Chuck's rerolls, and she can use Sentinel Prime's rerolls, making her just extremely, extremely deadly. She is somewhat soft here. I don't think any of her tactics cards are particularly playable. They're fun, but I don't think they're particularly strong. And again, the tactics cards are just so tight at the 5 here. But I like her a lot. The ability to pick damage type, I feel like is more relevant than ever with like lots of things that have, like weaknesses to specific things where like, if you have to go through Shang-Chi, being able to pick energy is helpful. Yeah, I like Psylocke a lot here. All right, our 5 threat is Jean Grey. I was told that this was good, and I was extremely skeptical, and my God, has Jean really, really impressed me. So why are we playing Jean? She was buffed like years ago and like saw like no play. One of the big things she can do is she can start the Charles power chain on turn 1 because she has both her throw and her push, her like activated character's push online on turn 1, meaning she can start the power chain from happening. She uses power incredibly well because the spender is absurd. It's so much damage, especially with like all these big boys running around. It gives her a second attack type where like, like she might be struggling to kill a Juggernaut or whatever because he's like Def 5 Mystic and like can't be moved or whatever. But like when you spender that guy and you throw him into your team, into your opponent's team, it feels really good. Spender is crazy. She also just can have really, really explosive turns because of mental domination. Being like builder, mental domination, spender, terrain throw is just an absurd amount of output and can easily turn a game. And then we're also stacking all the rerolls on top of it because we're trying to always play the double bubble of Chuck and Prime when we can fit it. So like it just grants a lot of output. And then she also has the Skulls Pierce, which is just like, it just feels nice. And with her wild, she can like, she can just like Yahtzee into a ton of power. Her downside is she is fragile, and you need to be really judicious about where you put her and about using Sacrifice and Dream to protect her activation. If she has activated and is still healthy, I think you can just let her die lots of times. Like, I would be very careful playing this list and playing those cards in a way that doesn't give you an activation you wouldn't have otherwise had. But yeah, Jean has really impressed me. Mental Domination is a crazy bananas card. And when you can reach like the high power thresholds, either she's just coming out of a daze, or you've been funneling her power, or she's Yahtzeed into a bunch of power by hitting a bunch of saps or spiking a builder, I think she can have really, really crazy turns. All right, our last guy is Gambit, who has been recently buffed. I have played this list entirely with New Gambit because New Gambit was spoiled way early of the Errata Pass. We knew he was in the Errata Pass because there was like a custom card of him at Adepticon, so I've been playing with him the whole time, and he is maybe the swingiest model in all of Marvel Crisis Protocol. The character can just die. He is 3/3/3, 5 hit points on each side. He can just like fall over dead. And I've had that happen several times where like he's been like trying to fight a Venom by just like pushing the Venom off the point and standing on the point and just Venomate him. And just like, sad. I've also had him kill Captain America with a 5-die attack on his flip side. Like, the character is just like crazy. Rerolls go so hard on this character because of the double wilds. And then the ability to pay 1 power for a little something extra, and the ability to pay 1 power to turn a hit into a wild is both good from being able to trigger your strong wild effects, but it's insane to pay 1 power to guaranteed increase your damage by 1. That is super strong. Like, pay 1 for 1 more damage, and if you're doing the builder, the power just immediately comes back to you, is crazy powerful. The character has an 85% chance to push a size 3 off of a point. You just like walk, do the bow staff. You need a hit or a wild on 4 dice, and the character leaves the point. That's very, very strong coming out of a 3 threat. Like, there's just so likely to be able to do that. And then his other thing that they changed on him is enhanced agility goes any direction, so it's not parting shot anymore, where it just like does a damage and he runs away from you. He can now go towards you, which is really, really relevant on Senators, where you can flop Gambit out there. And if they make any attacks at Gambit, Gambit gets to deal damage to them, hop up to a Senator, pick up the Senator, throw a card, and leave. It can be really, really strong. Gambit is just a crazy swingy model. I'm curious if he can completely do the Domino job, or if you're looking for like, all right, the thing that I need, I have three threat, I need a damage dealer. Can Gambit fill that role? And I'm like not 100% sold, but it's pretty close for like between Gambit and Domino, to the point where like the list needs Gambit for its Senators line, and I'm not sure that the Domino slot is worth it. So if I find something better to put in the Domino slot, I think Gambit can probably cover that role. All right, let's talk about Team Tactics cards. We've got To Meet My X-Men and Xavier's Dream, the 2 X-Men, and First Class, the 3 X-Men Tactics cards. To me, you need it to do safe grabs when you're not doing like the mass transit goofs. But also it's still valuable when you are doing the mass transit goofs. It's like a bad version of Avengers Assemble, and it turns out a bad version of one of the best tactics cards in the game is still very good. If you're not aware, like the safe grab To Meet My X-Men is you play To Meet My X-Men, you move one of your characters up. You don't have to play To Meet My X-Men on your leader's turn. You can play it on any character's turn. So you do it to like move a normal speed model up. It can then, after it walks short towards the middle, it can then walk, pick up a middle line extract, and then walk backwards. It can give you excellent safe grabs. And it like safe grabs for the cost of a card. And sometimes paying a card rather than 5 threat is way better. And X-Men heavily prefer doing that. Xavier's Dream is a very strong card that I think when you play on the other side of it doesn't seem as strong. So my kind of revelations by playing on the other side of Xavier's Dream after being blown out by it tons and tons of times are kind of 2 things. Is like, one, it is not as strong as like the truly busted MCP cards because it is a reactive card and not an active card. And I don't mean that in terms of like what those words mean in game of like the 2 types of tactics cards are active and reactive. I mean it in the terms of like Siege is a very Siege of Darkness is a very active card because you are using it to do damage and apply pressure to your opponent. And Xavier's Dream is used reactively to what your opponent is doing to prevent damage. And it is just never going to be on the level of the high-end versions of those cards. But I'm not saying the card's not good. The card's incredibly strong. My other big takeaway, having played on the other side of it, is it's often like thought of in the same vein as like Odin's Blessing or Exceptional Healing when Exceptional Healing was around, where it's like a card that's like, no, I don't take damage, right? I get to activate my model. You can't do anything about it. When really what it is it's like add X number of hit points to a character equal to the undazed models you have with power. So like if I have all 5 models on the board, I can play the card to add 4 hit points to a model you attack. And when you keep that in mind when you're playing against Xavier's Dream, is you just have to do the math in that and be like, okay, I have to go this many hit points above killing this character, or I have to be okay with that character not dying this activation. And that revelation has helped me play against it and play with that card a bunch. The card also feels better now that Namor is not like in every single list, because Namor was mostly a reaction to Thor 2 and Thanos being everywhere, and X-Men just got caught in the crossfire because he countered this card, which is their best card. So it feels better now that that's not around anymore, but also you can still get value out of Xavier's Dream if Namor's running around. You just have to be careful about it. First Class, you play it essentially only when you're playing pay-to-flips. There's like an argument to make Senators a little bit better, but there's probably a better card you can play there. So you're always playing Xavier's Dream. You're usually playing To Me My X-Men, and then if it's a pay to flip, you're probably playing First Class. So the tactics cards can range from extremely tight to like, I'm surprised you're not playing some of the X-Men cards, blah, blah, blah. The last X-Men card we have is Children of the Atom. Condition removal in Marvel Crisis Protocol is extremely rare. There's what, like 2 cards that do it, which is Children of the Atom and Battlefield Medicine. This pulls all conditions. It gives you power for having conditions. It can be really good. I like it especially in Apocalypse, who's going to try to stack conditions on a character. You can turn that into power all of a sudden and just like blow them out. Especially good with like Jean, where they're like, all right, take Root and take Stun and take all this nonsense. And you're like, no, I'll just take a bunch of power instead. And you can like just get a lot out of it. Very specific matchup tech, but very strong. Our 2 tactics cards that are restricted are Brace and Sack. Wow, surprise, it's a Vince video. He's playing Brace and Sack, because I think those are the 2 best restricted tactics cards. And you need a very good reason not to be on both of them. Brace for Impact is the most played tactics card in the game, and for a reason. There is throws everywhere. But on the subject of Brace for Impact, this list is doing something very interesting that I have been doing in the meta a lot, where I am playing very few models with throws. I believe Jean is my only throw in the list, which means it can be very tempting for your opponent to leave Brace for Impact behind. And so if they leave it behind because they don't think you're going to play Jean, or they don't think very highly of Jean, Jean gets to have like best day ever and deal tons and tons of damage because her first throw isn't countered. Or they play Brace for Impact into a team that doesn't play any throws, and then you get to just play a tactics card out. So that's a way that I'm like metaing the meta with this list. Sacrifice, still really, really good. Having Xavier's Dream, Sacrifice, and Brace for Impact every single game so that you are playing maximum protection, you have as much agency on your opponent's turn as possible, is really, really good. And like the thing that this team is, like the foundation that this team is built on. It's what lets it fight, is that you have all this agency on your opponent's turn with the rerolls and Brace for Impact and Sacrifice and Dream. And so you have a lot of say in like where damage goes and how much damage goes through, and it's where a lot of the strength of the list comes from. Mental Domination, we've talked about a little bit. The card's absurd. Giving Jean a third action is great. The card also walks the person. The card can also attack the person it walks. Like you can make them attack themselves with it. So it can just have an enormous impact on the board state by both taking a character off a point that's maybe already activated, killing another character, allowing Jean to have a really, really strong activation once per game. We talked about Mass Transit. Play it on Senators only. Play it only if you're at 18 threat or more. Any lower than that, and the support staff gets to be too much. Playing Survival. Survival, in theory, is for attrition matchups. It's really hard to get it into the 5 because, you know, like we have the 3 cards that are locked, and then it's competing with like To Me My X-Men, First Class, Mental Dom. Are really hard spots for it to overcome. But in theory, the card is good, and especially on your like value 3 threats like Gambit. Like Gambit likes to play Survival. Like Gambit gets blown up. He has a stack of power. Play Survival on him. They have to go in. They can't take Gambit off the table. You get to shoot a couple like really good beams. I have Warpath here in my last slot. There's like an argument that should be recal. This card really doesn't get in to the 5 very much, but in theory there's some interesting implications by moving the reroll bubbles around. It can also let a like Psylocke who's out of position get back into position and get Martial Artist back up. It's at least kind of interesting here, but you don't play it a lot. All right, Secures, we're playing Kraan, Meteors, Intrusions. Kraan and Meteors are fighting pay-to-flips that force tight, heavy interactions where I can put both reroll bubbles on all of the points and really, really fight. They're excellent for us. X-Men are very good at pay-to-flips because Nightcrawler is very good at pay-to-flips, and they have lots of mobility. And then I have Intrusions. Intrusions is arguably a relic from when I was playing Mass Transit. We really like 19 Threat because at 19 Threat, we can play like the full Mass Transit package if we want. We generally don't on Intrusions unless it's also Senators, but we can play the full fighting package. Like it's really easy at 19 to fit Prime into the list. You know, we're always playing Nightcrawler, we're always playing Chuck. That's 8. You play him, takes us to 13. Lets you play 2 fighting 3s. You can play like Gambit and somebody else. And really fight them. So I do like Intrusions. Maybe there's an argument with foes coming back into the meta, although I'm somewhat skeptical that that's actually real, that it's not just me playing foes, that maybe Intrusions isn't that good here, but I've had a lot of luck with it into the other fighting teams. Extracts, we are playing Deadly Legacy Virus because we have a safe grab and we're applying a lot of midline pressure with our guns and our multiple reroll bubbles, forcing the opponent to commit to the midline because most people don't have more than one pay to flip. It also can put them on a clock to pick up the other extract. So like a lot of times you're like, okay, I safe grab mine, you safe grab yours. Those are our 2 safe grabs. The other one across from it, you know, like we have our standoff there. But after I use 2 superpowers, or 1 superpower if I played first class, based on what the secure is, Nightcrawler now threatens to be a safe grab, because he can place 2 with 2 power, and then walk, pay a power to pick it up, or pay his first class token, depending on what's going on. And so you can snag a third safe grab if you're careful, and if depending on how much time they have. So that can, and if somebody sees this coming, they can be under pressure to pick it up earlier. On the midline, you can also play Gambit as like an expensive Toad. He's more durable than Toad because of the double wilds thing, and he still has 5 hit points, whereas Toad doesn't anymore. And you can pick it up and parting shot out, or enhanced agility out, if you take 2 damage. We're playing Skrulls, kind of the same thing. We can safe grab. We have lots of people that do like the R side Skrull. Both Professor X can do it, although it's harder to do the Professor X one if you're doing the safe grab, because you also have to be on first class because he spent his 1 power, or you have to use a superpower in some way to move it over. You can also wait until you move a power to Nightcrawler, because if Nightcrawler has bump, he can walk, or he can bump, walk, pick it up, back up. So Skrulls is good for us. We also like the high threat numbers. And then Senators. Senators is our best scenario by far. I haven't lost on it. Granted, I've only played like 3 or 4 games on it. The list you play at 19 is you play Professor, Nightcrawler, Wong. So that's your core 10 because that makes the mass transit line on Senators work. And then you play 3 3s. Our 3 mass transit 3s are Gambit, Magik, Iceman. And so you teleport those dorks up, and then you are trying to threaten to take theirs and back up, and then barring that, taking yours and backing up, while applying like damage pressure on them. If they just like run one guy in there and they pick it up, right, deal damage, steal their stuff, easy money. If they play it standoffish, use your power passing to try to get power moved around, make damage or scenario happen. We talked about this before, but like Gambit can use enhanced agility if he takes damage to come up and then back up. Magik can use bump to come up and then back up. And then Iceman can move people either forward or backwards if he gets 2 power. It's a list that threatens to take your extracts, and it's very far up the table, and their options get way larger if your opponent allows any interaction. And if they do literally 0 interaction, they've taken none of the scenario. Like they have to come interact, or they're just going to be so far behind. And you can close a Senators game so quickly because there's so many points on the board. There's at least 9 points on the board, but there's likely 10. And yeah, I don't know. I think Senators is wildly strong with the mass transit plan. And lastly, okay, so like this is mostly an intellectual exercise because I don't like playing Storm's style of play, but let's say you're a competitive X-Men player, or you're just a fan of X-Men, not having Storm running around with the X-Men just doesn't make sense to you. Pulling Domino for Storm is like totally reasonable, and then having the ability to play the Storm side of things is very, very good. I think I would cut Intrusions then for another pay to flip, maybe Empress. And then when you end up at like 17 Empress, you can play Storm and do that stuff. I'm not particularly interested in that, but I do think that there's some interesting stuff here. And then there's also a very popular Cyclops build going around. Maybe we'll do a video about that if this gets enough likes. But yeah, I think taking this, like, if you're a budding X-Men player that's trying to play X-Men competitively, I think taking this list and playing a couple games with it and seeing how you can fold its ideas into your X-Men play, I think would be a good exercise for you. But with that, what do you think of this list? Are you going to try it out? Does this seem like more fun than playing Storm X-Men? Let me know in the comments down below. And don't forget that fun is a finite resource.